Is Disabilities and Distance Learning's Dilemmas, featuring both Yvette Sarkar and Tammy Sebastian from the Ohio Coalition of Education of Children with Disabilities. This virtual speaker series program will answer common questions about providing distance learning to students with disabilities, and we're going to be taking your questions as time permits. This program is presented in partnership with Westlake Porter Public Library, and I am so grateful for our public library still supporting education virtually in our communities. Some important notes. All questions must focus on the special education of children aged 0 through 22 for the state of Ohio only. Our experts today will only be able to answer questions for the state of Ohio, and they cannot do anything that's outside of that scope. When you're posting your questions, we're going to ask you to please do not include the names of your children, your school district, or any educators. If you do, it will be immediately deleted. So please go ahead. You can put a general question if you want in there, but don't mention anything specific. Remember, this is an unprecedented time for our schools, for our communities. I think many of the administrators were not prepared for when this happened. And so to be kind to everyone involved who are often doing the best that they can in challenging circumstances, we're just going to keep the questions very general and provide facts that we're sharing out here. Okay, so if you want to ask a question privately, you are allowed to text Connecting for Kids at 440-570-5908. Otherwise, any comment that you put on here will be read publicly and can be viewed by everyone. Okay, so first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce everybody that's on this call and allow them to explain what their roles are. So Tammy, why don't you go first?
Hi, thanks, Sarah. My name is Tammy Sebastian. I work for the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities. I am an information specialist, and I cover Cuyahoga County, every school district in Cuyahoga County. And we are the state, just a little bit about the Ohio Coalition, we are the State Parent Training Information Center. So what that means is that under IDEA, the federal law, every state has to have a PTI in order to support parents so they can understand their rights and responsibilities under the law. And I also have 2 children with disabilities.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tammy. Yvette.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Yvette Sarkar, and I work in the multicultural division of the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities, specifically Spanish-speaking families. I am in 7 counties, which would be Medina, Geauga, Summit, Portage, Lake, Lorain, and Cuyahoga. I hope I got them all. And I am looking forward to connecting with everyone on Facebook Live and answering your questions.
Wonderful. And for those of you that do speak Spanish, we're going to be repeating this presentation on April 15th at 7 o'clock entirely in Spanish. So, Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole BornCRO. I'm a family resource specialist with Connecting for Kids. So I will be the one interpreting some of your questions and passing them on to our experts tonight.
Thank you, Nicole.
And I also have 3 kids at home educating right now.
Wonderful. All right, so Tammy and Yvette, we're just going to start with a general, I mentioned how the schools were very unprepared for the sudden switch to come home, but can you give sort of a general introduction about what's going on with special education during this time of distance learning?
Well, that's a loaded question. So, and Yvette, if you don't mind, I'll start. Right now, the overview I want to give for parents to kind of put their mind at ease is their rights under IDEA are still their rights under IDEA. I want to start off with that. And then also that the federal law requires distance instruction to be accessible, but it doesn't really talk to specific methodologies. So that is a challenge I think that all districts are facing. And one of the other things that we've seen too in the overview of everything is the federal law they actually had to put out guidance documents, they being the U.S. Department of Education, speaking to that school districts were struggling with whether or not they were going to provide that instruction, because when they had to do that, they also had once they provided the instruction for all kids, that would trigger them to go ahead and have to provide that for students with disabilities. And at that time, and we still are struggling with providing the guidance for these districts to be able to do that. Yvette, did you want to add anything to that?
Just that special education is a flexible process that's meant to meet the unique needs of each individual with a disability. And during this circumstances that we're currently having, the school should be making a good faith effort in trying to provide FAPE during these unprecedented circumstances.
Right, and FAPE is, can you just explain what that is in case
I
somebody—
apologize, a free and appropriate public education.
Okay. And so, you know, I love that you guys said their rights are still their rights. What I'm hearing from parents right now is a lot of fear, because they're, when they're calling or texting or connecting for kids, what they're saying is, my child is just not learning at home. And we can go through a lot of the different things, but they're not learning. And so what do you have to say about that? I think we got to sort of start with that fear.
Yvette, do you want?
Yeah, I can start because I educate my child at home. So I know this pretty well. I mean, when you have a child with a disability, pretty much from the get-go, you learn how to think outside the box. And this is just one of those situations where you have to think outside the box. And what I have been telling my families is start with making maybe a priority list every day and start building structure into your day. Try to find some free resources. There are some free educational resources online. I'm not sure if I should mention any of them, but maybe you could email me and I can provide some different resources to parents that are interested. And just try to build some structure into your child's day. There are different ways that you can learn through, like Zoom. You can work with some of your teachers through the phone. My son is doing both Zoom and phone calls, or there's also an online system where parents can work with their children. And I just think that building structure and teaching your kids independent skills. Maybe this is a good time to teach your kid how to fold laundry or how to cook in the kitchen, or doing more projects with your child and building some of those skills at home. So.
And I would just add to that, I know I said this at the beginning of the call, but I would just add that, and I know we keep hearing we're all in this together, that could be very frustrating for parents because they've never done this before. But know that most districts are going to want to be working with you. And I don't want to jump ahead, but you could still call IEP meetings, you know, having those conversations. And I kind of want to repeat what Yvette said, that good faith effort is really the strong guidance that we're getting from the U.S. Department of Education, from the Ohio Department of Education. Is really what they go back to. Are they is the district making a good faith effort? What would that look like? I think for me, it's having those conversations, at least having those conversations. And the communication, I think, is going to be key right now. But I don't think parents should think their role is actually to educate. And I don't think educators think that parents should be educating the child either. So we got to jump in this together and realize we're all equal partners in this.
Right. Thank you.
You're
all right. What we did is we surveyed Connecting for Kids families and asked them what questions they had for us tonight. So let me lead off with some of those questions. Why is there such a big difference in the types of distance learnings between different school districts?
It's a great question. So again, I think we can go back to the preparedness part. I think there's many different variables. It could be, you know, the rates of homelessness, poverty, Spanish speaking families. There could be many reasons why you're seeing that. But I've seen it. I've seen many districts that were taking a different approach. Some districts decided to use that extended spring break that we keep hearing about. And there was a lot of confusion in what that looked like. Was that actually technically instruction, or was that more of a review? And if the districts were taking that extended spring break, most of them that I have seen started off the first week, depending on, you know, some did the second week, but a lot of them were using like the blizzard bag approach, if
Right.
everybody understands that.
Right, and that's where you just got to pack it home with your kid. We heard this a lot. You got to pack it home with your kid, and then that was it. There was no modifications.
Yeah, and that's the problem though, when we came to, if they were using that blizzard bag approach, or if they were doing it as a review and they were not providing instruction, that's why students with disabilities were not receiving those accommodations or whatever was laid out in their services for their IEP, because they didn't have to provide them. But US Department of Education came out and said, please don't use that as a reason not to. Don't use your requirement under IDA to provide FAPE as a reason not to provide instruction to all kids. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Okay, which is why we're starting to see some of the changes.
Yeah.
And so,
I have a couple of questions if you wanted to take
Yeah.
some questions from families. So someone texted asking, basically saying that her son's school isn't providing resources or remote support to any student, typical and those on an IEP. How can I get them to encourage them to assist my son with remote IEP support and resources during this time? I've emailed the director to inquire with no response.
Wow. Okay. So there should be a plan starting next week. So up until this time, again, if they were using, depending, if they were using the extended spring break and just offering review, then she wouldn't have seen that. However, most districts this week are either laying it out and practicing, but by next week, they should all be providing distance learning in some way, shape, or form.
okay, good.
Okay.
One of the big questions that we're getting is, the IEPs include therapies such as occupational therapy, for example, or speech therapy. And yet, you know, we're hearing a lot of the private providers are doing telehealth, like, so you can call into your speech therapist or call into your occupational therapist that you're using your insurance to pay for. But families aren't seeing those services through their school OT or their school speech therapist. Should they be expecting that? Is that going to change?
Yvette, do you want to? I don't want to hog all the. Did you want to?
No, it's okay. I'm not completely sure. I think that schools have to make, again, a good faith effort to provide services to students. Obviously, with the situation where we have to distance ourselves, it's very difficult for therapists that are used to being up close and working with students physically to be able to provide any kind of physical help. However, they can still provide services and talk with parents and provide resources and guidance so that kids don't completely regress or lose skills. And it is possible to do that by phone, or again, if they have a computer. It just depends on what technology is available for parents at home. And those are things that can be discussed between the therapist and the parents. But those related services are part of a free and appropriate public education and need to be considered and carefully thought through when providing services for students at home versus at school.
And I would encourage, you know, it's not the parent's responsibility to, you know, and with being mindful of understanding we're all in this together, I don't want parents to feel like it's their responsibility to figure out how to provide those services. The districts have support and technical assistance that they can look to. The Educational Service Center, the state support team have plenty of resources. So if the districts are struggling, you know, and the parent can certainly tell them, you know, I understand, you know, I heard on this, you know, on this Facebook Live that, you know, you could reach out to the state support team if you're struggling. They have plenty of resources. Speech can be provided through video conferencing. The U.S. Department of Education recognizes that they might not be able to provide hands-on. I think physical therapy would be quite a challenge right now. So again, I know we're saying a lot of this goes back to that good faith, but I feel like once all this is said and done and the dust is settled from this, these are the conversations that we're going to be having. Is did you know, they provide that good faith effort, and what does that look like?
And I just wanted to mention also is that compensatory time and an extended school year services can be discussed if it gets to the point that the child is regressing significantly or hasn't been able to make meaningful progress and growth as a result of this absence of school.
So I think that right there, if you could explain that again, let me see if I can explain it in plain language, and then you tell me if I get it right. So let's say that I have a child at home and you know, I can't get them to sit down and do their math homework. They just won't do it for me. They're like, no, mom, and they throw it at my head. Let's just say, make that up as an example. Right? And, you know, when I try to get them to do their speech homework, you know, once again, I get something thrown at me. We're just making up things. I'm asking for a friend, okay? When we go back to school, I would be able to say to my IEP team, can I get some compensatory services, meaning can you help pay for summer school or a summer camp or something that would help them to catch up to their peers because we weren't able to do this at home?
That is really good way of describing a situation that could happen. And I think from you saying that triggered something for me. And I was actually talking to my director this morning, one of my directors, and she brought up a good point. We really need to be encouraging parents. We don't expect them to be data collectors, but that would be a scenario where I would be documenting that. Mm-hmm. And you know, saying, okay, so it, you know, there was, I mean, you don't have to get into how many prompts you took, you know, to get, but at least saying, you know, we tried to start this, it didn't, you know, it was an hour of frustrating. I would document that because those are things that you're going to probably need to discuss. And I think the school districts would probably appreciate that data. I would go to say they would probably appreciate that.
And it's really hard to turn your home into a school because kids look at home like, this is home, really? You know, go away, mom. So it's true, you know, unstructured home setting and a structured school setting are just really different. So like Tammy said, if parents can document, you know, what they're seeing, what, you know, what progress their kids are making or what areas they're seeing them have difficulty in, I think it'll be very helpful when the school team gets together to have those conversations, especially as it relates to compensatory time and extended school year services.
And also to add on that, the U.S. Department of Education and the state, ODE, OEC, Ohio Department of Education, Office of Exceptional Children, also said they have to look at the delay too. So the delay in providing those services. So not just the time you've been working with them, but the delay in starting those services. So I feel like we're going to be having a lot of compensatory time discussions. What is that going to look like? I think that remains to be seen. My hope, this is not anything that has been given to me. My hope would be is that there would be a lot of guidance to the districts, maybe flow charts, on how they're going to be able to handle those situations, some kind of guidance that they can go off of to start those conversations. And of course, as the State Parent Training Information Center, we would get a hold of those and make sure that we had parents to have that knowledge also.
Yeah. I mean, so yeah, go ahead, Nicole.
I was going to cut in and remind everybody of the rules real quick. 15 minutes, sorry. And then I have a question that's pertinent to this from a family. So just letting everybody know who's watching that all of our questions must focus on special education services for children between the ages of 0 and 22 in the state of Ohio. OCECD experts will not be able to assist with questions outside of that scope. And when posing questions, please do not include the names of your children's specific school districts or educators. Comments violating those rules will be deleted immediately. Sarah, you were going to say something, and then Jessica had a good question that kind of touches on this topic.
Well, what I was just going to sort of reinforce that, you know, Tammie, Ivette, Nicole, and I've all said we're still here for you. So when those rules change or new guidelines come out, we'll do another group so that way everybody can know that we're still going to be keeping them. As soon as you guys know more, we're going to share it, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Jessica had asked what kind of data and notes should they be keeping if they're concerned about regression and getting that's the hardest word to say, compensatory services.
Compensatory, I know.
Compensatory. I feel like I've never heard that word until just this pandemic.
Well, it's okay.
Compensatory.
I'll let you off the hook, Nicole, and I'll actually throw myself out there. I actually have been saying unprecedented instead of unprecedented.
Okay.
So it's okay because I talk.
We all have words that we don't say.
Let's just say money for summer camp, okay? Money for summer school.
Money for summer school. Yeah.
So again, I'm not, there is no specific documentation. I would just say, you know, to just be very generalized documentation about, you know, what, you know, you could look at depending on that child though, you know, so if it's behaviors, if it's, you know, how long it takes them to do work, it would really be kind of something goal specific. You would probably have to look at the goals. But in general, I would say, you know, like Sarah had said, you know, if there was getting a kid to work, how long that took. I don't think that there is anything specifically I would lay out. And there might be, you know, who knows, in the next week or two, someone might put that information out there as, you know, this is the data you should be collecting. So just, you know what, I would not drive myself crazy doing it. But if there are situations and there's frustrations, I would document them. It doesn't have to be anything specific, but you want to have a good benchmark of where they're at.
Yeah. Where a parent may want to start is just re-reviewing the IEP goals and taking a look at the latest progress report to see where their child's progress was last, and maybe try to work from there.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. And then the other thing that I sometimes suggest to parents that I did was just to journal it, like get a notebook and then write down each day how the day went. You know,
right.
Wanted to do the work, didn't want to do the work, only did half the sheet, refused to do any of the sheet, you know, or, you know, tried really hard, but it took them 2 hours to do something that should have only been 20 minutes. You know, all of that kind of stuff. Just writing it down as a journal is both therapeutic for the parent, but then it's something that you can share when we go back.
And remember, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Tammie.
And that's going to vary too, depending on how they are providing the services. You know, the teachers might be very aware, you know, if they're doing Zoom calls for the classroom instruction, they might be seeing things too. So I don't think you're going to be alone in collecting the data, or even having those conversations with their intervention specialists. Is there any data that you think that I should be collecting at home? You know, that might be helpful. Some children might already had been working with the BCBA, maybe pulling the BCBA and asking the BCBA questions on, and I'm sorry, board certified behavior analyst, or if they have a behavioral specialist in the school district, really utilize these resources now. And I am willing to bet they're going to be anxious to reach out and work with their families.
Well, and that leads me to my next question, which is, well, it was a little bit down, but it was about adding on services. So
Yeah.
if a family is having, like if a child was struggling in school with behavior, a family could ask for a functional behavior analysis. Can they still ask for that at home? Is that something they're allowed to ask for?
So that's a really good question. Whoever asked that is a really good question. So if it requires a face-to-face observation, the evaluation will need to be delayed. That's according to the considerations for students with disabilities that Ohio Department of Education put out. That was basically their answer. So a functional behavior assessment is considered an assessment / evaluation. So what they're saying is, and an FBA is all about looking at the function of the behavior. So you would actually need to have the child present. So, but there might be ways, again, reach out, there might be ways to collect that through the parent. But that would really be a conversation you would have to have with the IEP team. And if they have a BCBA or a behavior specialist, definitely bring them into the conversation. But typically a functional behavior assessment requires a body. Okay.
Thank you. Nicole, any other questions before we continue on?
Yes, we've got lots. Let me scroll back up.
Mind if I get us some water?
Right, go for it. And I just want to let everybody know who is asking questions on Facebook. If I don't get to your question right now, it's because I'm trying to fit it in to where it makes the most sense for what we're discussing. So I'm not forgetting about you. I just may be popping around and doing different questions. So I guess along the same lines, a lot of people, specifically Victoria and Joanne, I think, are both asking, what do they do if their school isn't providing any accommodations right now? So I know one family is at a private, it looks like it's a charter or a public school. Actually, both of them look like they're at public schools.
Okay.
And one is on a 504. So is there any differences right now between kiddos on 504s getting accommodations? No. Okay.
No, but again, right now we're in a transition period. So it really depends on if they are still using that extended spring break, or did they go on to providing distance learning? And so I wouldn't really be able to answer that unless I knew if they were providing that. Once everybody is providing, and that again should be starting next week, if they are still not receiving those accommodations, they really need to, I would encourage them to reach out to the 504 coordinator. And if it's an IEP, to reach out to their IEP team. You can still have IEP meetings via Zoom, via so many other ways to have this. You can even do it the good old fashioned phone call. So there are many ways to do that, but reach out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just say one thing too, is if it says it in this guidance report, this supplemental fact sheet that I have, if you have any questions for OCR, or you want additional information or technical assistance, or believe that a school is violating a federal or civil rights law, you can reach out to their office if you have additional questions in regards to that.
Okay.
And I just want to clarify. So if whatever they're doing for gen ed students, they need to do for all students. Okay. All means all.
But a lot of schools haven't come up against the deadline by which they have to have started things. So don't panic, right? I would assume.
I would not. And I would go back to what Sarah was saying. If we need to do this again next week and the week after that, we will.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think that was sort of our next two questions, is that many families are feeling like they didn't get any accommodations for their child. They got a packet and it was, okay, go with this, even though their child has dyslexia and doesn't read well, or their child struggles with pencil and paper tasks, and yet everything was a pencil and paper. And so really it's just, let's wait and see what happens on Monday. And reach out to your team and see if there's any accommodations.
And I would also remind that, again, I don't want to keep going back to that compensatory education, but that would be the delay of services, because that child was not able to access that information, even though you didn't have to do that for, you were just providing those packets. That's another layer I would have to say they're going to have to look at as far as compensatory education is. So I don't want parents to feel like, I really truly have to believe that districts are going to try to do the best they can to make sure all students, we got to remember this is affecting everyone. I know we're specifically talking about students with disabilities right now, and they are at a way different when we're looking at the services that they need in order to access. But I just want to remind everybody that I do have a belief that districts are going to do what they can. It's just going to take a lot of communication and a lot of making sure that we're coming together and having these conversations, calling these IEP meetings. I know there was a lot of concern. I was hearing a lot of districts were canceling their IEP meetings, and I was just really, I was baffled by that. So that should not have been occurring. I know that they were probably worried on how they were going to do that. So, but that should still be occurring.
Because that was actually my very next question, which was that we did hear a lot of families who said that their IEP meetings were canceled. And so if that happened, what should they do?
I'd reschedule it. I mean, just plain and simple, I would reschedule the IEP meeting. I would be concerned on why they, they were canceling it. I would still hope that we were sending prior written notices when we're doing that. Prior written notices when the district's, initiating or refusing. So if we're canceling meetings, I'd like to know why. I'm not saying it's required. I'm just saying I would like to know why. There needs to be a communication of why they were canceling that meeting. Was it due to the staff not being in the buildings? They couldn't get the Zoom call? Were we going to reconvene, or were you just totally canceling meetings? So I think it's dependent on what that looked like. But we heard a lot of that too. There's, they can still take place. I've always attended, not all the time, but there's a lot of times where I can't be at a lot of IEP meetings, and I've always attended Zoom or via conference call. So those options are always available to parents. So, it's really, it has to be a mutually agreed upon time and place. And right now we all don't really have a choice.
Right. Okay, thank you. Nicole, do you want to ask one of the questions?
I would love to. So we have a lot of parents who have some ESY, some extended school year concerns.
Yep.
So different than, worrying about regression. A lot of families are asking about ESY and being told that they won't be able to offer ESY because there won't be any providers. Providers are saying that they won't be open. So we have that question several times. A couple of schools are saying they cannot find providers for ESY due to the virus shutting down so many places. So I don't know if you have any insight on that. I think,
well,
it's a little tricky still right now, probably.
Sometimes parents have providers. So we can talk about whether the parents might have providers that they know. This still needs to be, we have to remember, this still needs to be an IEP team decision.
Yeah.
So we can't just make this, general determination. Well, we can't find providers, so nobody's getting ESY. No, that shouldn't be occurring. Yeah. The guidance document, the considerations, I'm going to refer back to the considerations for students with disabilities from ODE, states the need for ESY should be evaluated after the ordered school closures ends. So if that's only if they've not already determined they need ESY. So some of those decisions may have already been made. but they can't make, according to the document from the state, Ohio Department of Education, it says it should be determined after the school closure has been done. And that could go, who knows right now. So,
yeah, I mean, I think the concern is, and I mean, I could be totally wrong on this, that with so many places not knowing if they're going to be open in time for the summer, so
yeah,
camps that don't know, those would be the typical providers that these kids are sent to.
Yeah.
So I think it's a frustrating spot because nobody really has answers for if there will even be providers for ESY this summer.
and you're going to have, again, you're going to have to look at, I mean, there's many ways. Kids receive extended school year many different ways.
Okay.
I can just use an experience of my own daughter. One time she just needed extended school year with her math goal. And so she went and met a tutor at the library for an hour, 3 times a week. Well, if that was the case, we could do that via Zoom, right?
Right.
So we can't just use this overall, like we don't have providers. So again, we have to look at that, and we have to keep in mind that we're all in this, it's a learning curve, and we really shouldn't be making harsh decisions right now. Whether that be the school district or the parents. A question had came up where, and I forget, maybe we were all talking, Yvette had brought up an instance about maybe, enrolling or re-enrolling somewhere. And I said, my thing is I would not make a huge move right now in these uncertain times. And I would hope the districts wouldn't put out a guidance like that without knowing where we're at first. So again, it's a wait and see.
Yeah, and it's sort of along those lines of the wait and see and have faith. What I would say to all the families is that Connecting for Kids will do a virtual resource fair. So we've always done resource fairs in the spring. We usually do them in March and April so that families can find plans for the summer. We held off on that because of the virus, but we are going to do something once things kind of ease up and parent and providers know what they're going to do. So, before school gets out, we will definitely do something virtually so that families know what is available. But have some faith, because I think nobody really knows when this is going to end yet. Like, is it going to end in April? Is it going to end in May? Is it going to end in June? And so with all of that uncertainty, I think we just need to have a little faith and to know that they can trust us, that we'll let them know what providers are going to be offering summer programs.
And we are going to be here as the State Parent Training Information Center, as we always have, if not more now. So we know, and one of the unique things that we have as the State Parent Training Information Center is that we are parents of children with disabilities. We're in this boat with you. So we totally get it. And if we don't have the answers, we'll get them. And we might have to wait, but we'll get them.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Nicole, do you want to...
Yeah, I'll throw some other questions at you.
Yeah.
Joanna also had a question about grading, and I don't know if there was any guidance on that, but do you know if children will be graded on any of this?
So they've given that's a local decision to be made. So my fear is there's going to be a lot of disparity across the state of Ohio. Mm-hmm. Some are doing pass-fail options. So, it just really, it's going to be up to the local districts. So we're going to have a lot of districts doing a lot of different things. You're going to have a lot of parents feeling a lot of different ways. I'm not a fan of the pass-fail. There's parents that are fans of the pass-fail, so that's really what it is right now. It's a local decision. So I would encourage parents. Wow, you guys got a lot of savvy parents, like asking some really good, they're on it. And I would say, okay, so you know what, reach out to your district and say, how is this going to look? And, when are you going to let us know? Because parents need to know this, and kids need to know this.
Yeah.
They really need to know this. And a lot of them are worrying, especially this time of the year. Yvette, did you want to add anything? I'm sorry.
No,
okay.
As far as grading, I would just encourage parents to try to keep some information, you know, as to what they're seeing at home, so that they can share it with the school when it's possible, when they have a meeting or when school resumes.
So along those lines about adding on services, we've been hearing a lot about that anxiety that children are having, and parents are asking if you can add on services, like for example, counseling, if the child is really struggling. Is it possible to add on services at this time?
So that's another great question. So again, I would be careful. You know, whenever you add something to the IEP, we always have to have, and I know I'm going to go a little bit deep, but that ETR, our evaluation, or any assessment serve as, it's kind of the heart of what we need to provide, right? We need that information. So before you add or take away a service on an IEP, you need data to support it. So again, I'm going to say, absolutely, if you feel that they need that, I would call an IEP team meeting, talk about what that would look like right now. You know, and again, it would be an IEP team decision, just like it would be if we were in school. But I would absolutely, you know, I would want parents to understand that we need data to support that, and what the district's going to determine that what that data looks like is really going to be that discussion. And I'm so sorry I can't give solids. It drives me more crazy than it probably does them, because I'm a very factual, here's your documentation. But remember, this is really, we really haven't changed. Your rights are still your rights under the law. So yeah, you can still ask for those services. I just think it's going to be tricky getting those assessments and the data.
And in order to get services, typically it's because you need them because the problem is an obstacle for access to the curriculum. So,
yes,
you know, and we don't know if this is just a temporary situation right now where, you know, the transitions are hard for some kids and they're having a hard time. This just happened a few weeks ago, right? So,
yes.
So maybe this is something that will self-correct. Maybe it won't. Maybe this is a new problem that's going to create an obstacle to access to the curriculum. So that's why it's just so important for parents to just kind of chart some things and say, gosh, I'm concerned about this. It's getting worse. It's, you know, it's getting better, so that when they do have that meeting, they can discuss it, because they don't just provide services.
Because.
Yes.
Right. And Yvette, you brought up an absolutely great point, that it has to be because they need that to access the curriculum. And so, you know, there are other things that you can do though, if the team does decide that and they think it could be because of that, you could always put that in the IEP that you were going to reevaluate the situation once we went back into school too. So again, I'm really going to say we have to be really good communicators during this. IEP teams, which include the parent. Parent, you are part of the IEP team.
Nicole?
Yeah, along those same lines for IEPs and goals, it looks like a couple of parents had a question about social skills IEP goals. I don't know if there's probably not been anything specific, but perhaps you have some insight as to what families can do for very isolated kiddos who need to socialize.
Well, so I'm going to go back to that document.
Yeah.
We have to look at the health and safety of the child first before anything. So if that social goal is for other peers, we're going to have a problem. It's to be with other peers. It's really going to depend on how that social skill goal is written. It's very hard to have social skills with your peers when you don't have access to them. So that's actually a really great question. So Yvette, do you have any insight on that?
Well, I'm kind of processing, because I know that's a difficult thing, but maybe pen pals, or there's different, you know, maybe you can connect with your student directory with other kids that you may have liked and talk on the phone a little bit, or if you have a computer, you can do like a virtual, you know, FaceTime, or you can, you know, even like with our loved ones that we can't really see because of the situation, you know, we're connecting with them virtually. So I think there's ways that we can, you know, compensate for it.
Yeah.
That just means we have to think a little bit more creatively and outside of the box.
Yeah.
But
And I'm just gonna say, I've seen kids communicating with their peers very well on their FaceTime and you know, but when we have a child who struggles with those social skills, that is gonna be a layer to it. So I just want to say that one of our directors is actually watching. So if I keep looking down, she's trying to interact. We probably should have brought her in the call because she's adding. And I think it'd be great if maybe we did if we did have another one that we brought her into it. Yeah. But she was actually adding that there are other modes of interaction, just like Yvette was saying, that you could use for those goals. Again, I know I keep sounding like a broken record, but thinking outside of the box, having those conversations, your school team is probably going to be coming up with a lot of ideas. I'm not going to be shocked within the next couple of weeks if we don't get inundated with a ton of information on how to provide this and all these different tips and goals. And Connecting for Kids is wonderful for getting that information out there and having a ton of resources for that. So I have faith that we're all going to get enough information for parents not to struggle and districts not to struggle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then she said, sorry, I'll stop. No, you don't have to stop, Maria.
You tell her she's welcome for the next one. We would love to have her.
Coming to the next one, Marbella.
Do you want me to move on to more questions, Sarah?
Yeah.
Gladly. So Kira had a question about autism scholarship providers. Are all autism scholarship providers required to provide distance learning support?
So, great question. So when you take the scholarship, John Peterson Autism Scholarship, you do not have a right to a free and appropriate public education. So as far as your rights under the law, there is none. So I would hope that they are providing that. I think the struggle is going to be the districts that are writing these IEPs for the scholarships. I think that would probably become a challenge. But there is no a free and appropriate public education for a scholarship. So there are no rights afforded to them. So it really doesn't apply.
Okay. So can I add to that if you're done, Tammy?
Yeah, I'm done.
My child is accessing the Autism Scholarship, and we use, I'm using 2 providers that were in-home teachers, tutors. And when this situation happened, we just merely transitioned from in-home to virtual. So we're using the Zoom method, which seems like it's working out really well because it's free for one-on-one teacher and student. There's no time limit. And he's able to the teacher can share documents on the Zoom call with my child, and he's learning. Of course, he's happier because he has autism. He's happier they're not coming to the house anymore, which I'm not really happy about. But there's no rules, except for the neat thing is you're more in the driver's seat with the scholarship, and all of our providers have been wonderful in terms of working with us virtually.
And I would remember too that you are, as the parent, you pick those providers. So I would remember that if they're not providing, that's the same way, you know, even though you don't have FAPE guaranteed to you or afforded to you, for a private school, you're paying tuition, right? So I would hope that gives you some kind of leverage, just as the fact that you're picking those providers for your scholarships. Maybe you want to remind them that, you know, if they're not providing and they're not willing to work with you, that you'll look for other providers then.
That's right.
Yeah, I think Yvette and Tammy, where I'm hearing the questions from those families is the more moderate to severe disabilities that are in the therapy centers where virtual is not working. They're not engaging with a therapist over a screen. They're not attending for more than a minute or two with a parent trying to engage with them. And so many of the families I know that have children with moderate to severe autism in particular, but other disabilities, really feel like this entire time is just wasted. The kids are, you know, on YouTube or watching their favorite videos, and they're just not able to engage without that physical presence there, doing hand over hand work or that one-on-one engagement. And so I think that's where the fear is coming in, is that the therapy centers aren't really able to do anything virtually. And so they lose that money and be able to then do stuff over the summer or not. That's where their questions are coming from.
Okay, as far as the scholarships are concerned, or in general with therapy?
Yeah, so if they're using the scholarship and let's say that there was, you know, let's say 8 weeks left of the school district a year, do they get that cash then to be able to pay for something over the summer, or probably not?
Yeah, so those are really good questions. That's going to be, I don't know. And that we're going to probably have to reach out to guidance from the Ohio Department of Education, the scholarship department. If you want to, if parents want to jump ahead and go on the Ohio Department of Education website and in the search engine type in scholarships, their scholarship department, the people that are in there are more than willing to answer your questions. Those are great questions for them. And I would certainly, and I understand, I hope I didn't come off as, you know, if the providers aren't doing it, leave. I understand their challenges also, but if they're providing that effort, that's a different story.
Right.
I just think, you know, while you were saying that, that is really a challenge. And that's where they're going to have to really look at, as a scholarship provider, how they're going to be able to, you know, to provide that once they're back.
And it may be some coaching involved where the therapist can do a virtual with the parent and help them, like working with, you know, if they have a device, or kind of help guide things. I believe that even if this child is moderate to severe, they still can learn in alternate ways. It doesn't have to be, you know, there's other ways you can reach a child. And it's just a matter of everyone putting their minds together and being creative.
But we also have to acknowledge, I'm sorry, Yvette, were you done? I'm sorry. We also have to acknowledge too, that parents are also still working remotely. So, you know, we're not just sitting here, you know, being able to do that too. Yeah. So we have to, I just think there's so many things that we have to consider when we're trying to do it, and provide those services, maybe scheduling, you know, different times, not during the day. That's just really going to be the willingness on the providers. Again, it comes down to communicating and talking about it. But I would definitely encourage any parent with those scholarship questions to call the scholarship department in the Ohio Department of Education. They're going to really love me after this.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Nicole, what other questions?
Kind of in the same vein, and we may have kind of touched on this, but it's slightly different. Are alternative schools that are district placed required to provide distance learning? Little nuance there.
Yeah. Yes. They still have rights. So if they are placed by the district, they still have to provide FAPE. Okay. So, you know, I would definitely, if you have a child who is placed by the district, a lot of times districts are not aware that that's occurring. So you might want to bring them into, call the district rep, the director of pupil services, the special ed director, and let them know that that's not taking place, because ultimately that district is responsible. So they're going to want to know. They'll probably thank you very much for letting them know. But if that is not taking place, I would definitely reach out to your district.
So it's along those same lines. One of the questions we get is about aides. So if your child had a one-on-one aide during the school day, do they get a one-on-one virtual aide?
Well, that would be one of those out of the box things that they could. So again, it's going to be individualized. And going back to that guidance document, according to the considerations for the students with disabilities guidance, if they say, if a district is providing, the exact nature and duration of the services should be made on a case-by-case basis. So it really has to depend on the needs of the individual student. So if they do require a one-on-one, that is a conversation that you could have, but it really is, what was that one-on-one for? So if a one-on-one was a support for behaviors, I'm not sure what that's going to look like. You're really going to have to look at the IEP and look at what makes sense.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's why they keep pushing back, saying that it really needs to be an IEP team decision. You have to look at the individual needs of the child and recognize that they have to provide FAPE, but they also have to balance the need to protect the student also. It's a balancing act right now. It's FAPE, and am I exposing that child by providing those services one-on-one? And I don't see that happening. I just don't.
Yeah.
You're going to have to look at what that, I would say you're going to have to look on what is that one-on-one support for, and then go and have the conversations of, would that even benefit at this time?
Okay. Thank you, Tammy.
Yep.
Nicole?
So I've had this question a couple of times, but I got a text from a parent asking, can you pull your child who is currently enrolled in a public school with an IEP to officially homeschool them? Can you still apply for 3 months of the John Peterson Scholarship? And also, how would that affect the IEP for the next school year if the current one goes through 2020?
Yvette, this was almost your exact question.
Mm-hmm.
Is that Yvette?
And this was Tammy's answer.
Yvette.
Just like in the movies, don't make any sudden moves,
Mm-hmm.
right?
So Yvette, do you want to go ahead, since that was your...
Well, if this is something that the parent has been thinking about for a while, and this is something that, you know, you've been interested in doing, and you might think that this would be a great time to transition to it, then that's one thing. But if you're doing it because of these circumstances that we're in, I would agree that it's probably better not to make a change just all of a sudden. Maybe you want to wait to see if your child is going to qualify for compensatory time or extended school year services or any of these other things before you make this decision. But if you, with the scholarship, my understanding is you can apply at any time. Even if it's going to end now, it doesn't matter. You can go ahead and apply for it. The school district still does the IEP. They're still responsible for writing the IEP, even if you're on the scholarship. So
I just want to remind everyone, you also have to have an agreed upon IEP before you can access the scholarship. So if you don't have an agreed upon IEP, meaning if there, you left with not signing, or, everybody wasn't in agreement, that needs to happen before you get the scholarship. So I just wanted to remind everybody, you have to have an agreed upon IEP before you can access the scholarship. But I would agree with Yvette. I wouldn't make big sudden moves like that, unless that's, Yvette brought up a good point. This might've been something you were considering already. And I think we had this discussion earlier, and Sarah brought up administration is still in. So if you need to enroll or take that child out, those, you can still do that.
Right. And along those lines, because this was sort of our last question we had from our families, was about if you were in the middle of an evaluation for an IEP or transitioning from Help Me Grow to the preschool, those still should keep on track, right? That deadline, they should still be moving forward with that, correct?
Yes. Just remember though, if the evaluation, here's the thing, if the evaluation still requires that one-on-one, like, so this is how I compared it. A lot of times parents will call us maybe at, the end of May and say, I want to request an evaluation. Is the 60-day timeline still available because school's out? And that's yes, it is. However, are we going to get good information about that child? Probably not. So again, you have to look at whether or not that's going to benefit the child or not. But yes, the timelines still do adhere.
Okay.
The answer to that question, yes. But you asked another one on top of that about transition, right?
Right.
So,
yeah.
We did reach out to the Office of Early Learning, and their guidance was the options would still be virtual, phone, or wait. But they also said if you do wait, because the question I had was some families are in limbo because they were supposed to transition to school at age 3, so therapy stopped from Help Me Grow.
Right.
And they stated if they wait, they could also risk the school would risk noncompliance. They can reach out once again to the educational service centers. And then we actually got, we actually had received an email. So I don't know if you want to post that. Do you guys have that in the resources? Because we have a contact for any families that want to reach out to Jody at the Office of Early Learning. So do you guys have that?
Yeah, we'll make sure that gets posted in the comment section.
Perfect. So, and I do know that the Office of Early Learning is working on guidance documents for that. So we should be seeing those come around the corner too.
Okay. So, yes, we'll post it within a half an hour after we're done.
Awesome.
Okay. So it is getting close to 8. That was all of my questions, but how if we take 2 more questions that came in through the comments?
Fine with me.
Thank you.
I don't have too many more. I feel like we actually covered them all.
Oh, good for us. Yeah.
I mean, there was one, it's very confusing and I can't quite get to what exactly was being asked, but it was something having to do with group therapies and teachers trying to do, because I mean, a lot of children in settings at school have group PT or group speech language and social skills. So is there any, I guess, protections in place for if students were getting those, and how, I guess there's some worry about other families now, I guess, privacy issues having to do with that? Yeah.
So that's another unknown that we have right now. Mm-hmm. As far as that, I know that's a lot of teachers' questions right now on the protection and the privacy.
Yeah.
I don't know how those individual policies, district policies, or I have not seen, doesn't mean there isn't, I haven't seen exact guidance from FERPA, which would be like our educational protection for, student records or I have not seen any guidance on that yet. That doesn't mean there isn't any or that there isn't some coming. Okay. I see the challenge with that, because those kids would still be in a group with those kids. That's not the problem. Now you're in that person's home and people are able to see and hear what's going on with those other students.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that is actually going to be a challenge.
Yeah. So we'll Alyssa, I think that was your question. So we'll make sure to keep you informed if we get any updates from FERPA. I'm sure it's coming, but just
And like I said, it could be out there and I just might
Okay.
not, I might have missed that.
All right, I'll write it down. We'll follow up. And that was the last question that I think we had in. Let me make sure.
All right, so and what I'm going to do is I'm going to mention just a couple of things. First of all, we're going to post a survey, and we'd like all the families that are out there to complete the survey to let us know. I mean, 2 weeks ago, I'd never even heard of Zoom, let alone try to Facebook Live. And so we would love it if you can give us feedback about how this is going, what we can do to be able to make your questions easier to answer so we can get communication out to you. Like Tammie and Yvette and Nicole, we've been saying all along, we're on this journey together. We're all mothers. We're in this because of that. We want to help everyone. And so help us figure out what we can do to best communicate with you. So please take a moment to fill out the survey. Secondly, we will make sure that we post in the comments all of the things that we mentioned. You know, we'll have contact information for Tammie and Yvette. We'll make sure that you know how to get a hold of Nicole if you've got follow-up questions, and then we'll make sure that that resource that you were just talking about, both the scholarships as well as the early education, that is something that families have. If not, you can always contact our main number. You can text it, or you can send us an email, and Nicole will follow up with you.
I have one more thing real quick, Sarah, that I just want to mention about Zoom. I want to encourage parents to please try to read the privacy piece before they put their kids on Zoom. And also you can get on Zoom and take the video option off so that your child is not on Zoom, just in case there's extra advertising or marketing and you don't want your child exposed out there. So just something that I think is important is parents need to research these systems that they're using to make sure that the privacy of their children is protected.
Absolutely. Thank you, Yvette, for remembering that, right? All right. And then lastly, I want to thank Tammie and Yvette so much.
I want to thank you. Thank you, Connecting for Kids. You are a valuable resource. We love partnering with you. I'm so glad you provided us this opportunity. I think, Sarah, you and I and Yvette were all thinking at the same time, we have to get to our parents and tell them we're okay, we're going to get through this. And I'm so glad you provided that opportunity for us today. And we're there for you, parents. We're right there with you. And please feel free to reach out to myself or Yvette. And you said you will be sharing that contact information, correct?
Right. And then Yvette and I and Andrea Campesino will be on in Spanish, having a similar conversation on April 15th at 7. And then I'm sure we will be back talking about things as they evolve. And I know that Connecting for Kids will have some kind of a virtual resource fair about what's going to be available for ESY for the summer. So if families have not joined us, they can join us at connectingforkids.org. And thank you. And you guys have a wonderful evening.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you so much.
Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.